The morning after Kaylin's visit to the Silver Vale was colder than usual. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy, filled with dark clouds that hung low over the city. Lena stood by the window in her small room above the tavern, staring out at the streets below. She had hoped that something would feel different after the night before, something in her, something in him, but the world outside remained unchanged. The same people walked by, the same stories whispered in the wind. Yet inside her, something had shifted. Lena had thought that offering kindness to Kaylin would be the end of it. She'd had conversations like that before, words exchanged with weary souls, but they were always fleeting. And yet with Kaylin, something lingered in the air, something that felt like a promise. She couldn't explain it, but the way he had looked at her when she spoke those words, "I would have stayed," haunted her. She didn't want to admit it, but the truth was clear. She had left a piece of herself with him. Hours later, Kaylin returned to the tavern. Lena hadn't expected him to come back so soon, but there he was, standing in the doorway as if he belonged there, as if the heavy weight of the city had pulled him back into its grasp. She greeted him, as always, with a faint smile, but something in his eyes stopped her. There was a new intensity in them, a fire that hadn't been there before. He didn't look broken this time, nor distant. There was something about him now, something uncertain, as if he was searching for something or someone. "Is there anything you'd like?" Lena asked, her voice soft yet firm. She had to remind herself that she was just the waitress, just the person who served drinks and listened to stories. Kaylin paused for a moment before answering. "I don't know what I'm looking for," he said, his words tinged with frustration. "But I think it's here." Lena felt a wave of unease wash over her. He was standing too close, too still, and yet she couldn't deny that his presence made her heart race. The last time she had seen him like this, he had been broken, lost in his own sorrow. Now there was something new, something that both scared and intrigued her. "Are you here to drink away your pain?" she asked, trying to keep the conversation light, even though her own emotions were anything but. Kaylin shook his head slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I think I'm here to face it." They sat together, Kaylin's wine untouched as he stared into the flickering candlelight. Lena found herself watching him more than she had intended. There was a quiet sadness about him, a sadness that went deeper than anything she had imagined. She wasn't sure why, but she could sense that he wasn't just here to drown his memories. He was here to confront them. "I can see you're different," she said, her voice softer now. "More awake than last time." Kaylin's lips twitched in a faint, almost sad smile. "Maybe I am," he said. "Maybe I was asleep for too long," Lena frowned. "And now you're awake?" "Not really," he replied, shaking his head. "But I think I might be ready to try." There was a silence between them, deep and full of unsaid things. It was as if they both knew something they didn't yet have the courage to speak. As the evening wore on, the tavern grew quieter, and Lena found herself alone with Kaylin. The other patrons had left, leaving just the two of them. The stillness was thick, hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. "I've been thinking about what you said," Kaylin murmured, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "About staying." Lena swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. She had hoped he would never bring it up again. She had hoped those words would fade into the background, as so many things did. But now, they seemed to haunt him just as much as they haunted her. "I didn't mean anything by it," she said quickly, her words stumbling out. "It was just a slip." Kaylin shook his head, his expression serious. "No, it wasn't a slip. I think you meant it. And I think you know something about me that no one else does." Lena felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know how to respond, didn't know what to say. She had never been one to speak her mind, to reveal the secrets she kept buried deep inside. But with Kaylin, something was different. The walls she had carefully built around herself were starting to crumble brick by brick. "I don't know you," she said quietly, her gaze dropping to the floor. "And you don't know me." "Then let's change that," Kaylin said, his voice soft but firm. I don't know why, but I feel like I'm supposed to be here. With you! Lena's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to say something, to tell him how she felt, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stood up quickly, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the pitcher of water on the counter. Kalen watched her closely but didn't move. His eyes, dark with something she couldn't quite name, followed her every movement. I don't want to talk about this, Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't. I understand, Kalen said, standing up as well. But you don't have to hide from me. Not anymore. The words hung in the air like an invitation, one that Lena didn't know how to accept. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time in a long while she was afraid. Afraid of what she might say, of what she might feel. The curse that tied her to the tavern, to the city, to a life she didn't want. Was it stronger than this strange pull she felt toward Kalen? I have a curse, Lena said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. I can't leave this place, no matter how much I want to. Kalen stepped closer, his eyes softening with understanding. I didn't know. I've been here for years, Lena continued, her voice shaky. I'm bound to this place, to the land. I'm stuck here, trapped in a life that isn't mine. Kalen reached out, gently taking her hand. The touch was warm, grounding. Then let me help you, he said, his voice full of quiet determination. You don't have to stay here alone. Lena pulled her hand back, her chest tightening. She had never allowed anyone this close before, never let anyone in. The curse kept her isolated, but so did her fear of allowing someone to care for her. And yet something in Kalen's eyes told her that he wasn't like the others. He didn't want to fix her or save her. He just wanted to stay. I don't know how, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kalen smiled softly, his eyes full of something warm, something hopeful. Then we'll figure it out together. For the first time in a long while, Lena didn't feel alone. She didn't know what the future held or how things would change. But in this moment, with Kalen standing beside her, there was a small glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't bound to this curse forever, and maybe, just maybe, the man who had once seemed so lost could help her find the way out. The rain had been falling heavily all evening, tapping gently against the windows of the Silver Veil, a dimly lit tavern nestled in the heart of the city. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood, worn leather, and something else. Something sweeter, like the scent of secrets. This was where the lost and the broken came to forget their troubles, to drown their hearts in drink. But for Lena, the waitress, it was just another night of serving those who didn't care about her, of watching the same tired faces come and go. Lena was used to it. She was used to the way her feet ached after hours of moving between tables, the way her hands shook slightly as she carried drinks to the men who sat in silence. She had long ago learned to wear a smile like a mask, to keep her thoughts locked away, hidden behind the quiet movement of her hands. But tonight, something felt different. It started with him. His name was Kalen, and he entered the Silver Veil like a shadow, tall, broad-shouldered, his face obscured by the hood of his cloak. He looked like someone who had seen too much of the world, someone who carried the weight of it with him. There was an aura about him, a sense of weariness that clung to him like a second skin. When he sat at a corner table, Lena's attention was drawn to him immediately. She didn't know why. It wasn't that he was particularly striking, but there was something in the way he held himself, like he was always on the edge of leaving, yet never quite able to. She approached him, her smile in place, her voice steady. Good evening. What can I get for you? Kalen looked up at her, his blue eyes sharp and distant. There was a flicker of something in them, sadness perhaps, or anger. It was hard to tell. A glass of wine, he said quietly, his voice rough, like he hadn't used it much in days. Lena nodded, turning to fetch the drink. She wasn't one to make conversation with the patrons unless they spoke first. But something about him made her feel like maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. When she returned with his wine, she set it down in front of him carefully, her hands brushing against the cool glass. Is everything all right? She asked, her voice soft. She had seen it before, the way people hid behind their pain. But Kalen seemed different. His sorrow was almost tangible, a weight that made the air around him heavier. Kaylin looked at her for a moment, as if debating whether or not to answer. Finally, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Does it look like everything's all right?" he asked, his tone a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. Lena hesitated, but then smiled faintly. "I suppose not," she replied. "But sometimes it helps to talk." Kaylin stared at his glass, swirling the wine slowly. "I'm not much of a talker." "I can see that," Lena said softly, trying to keep the mood light. She didn't want to push him, but there was something in her chest that told her she should try. She didn't know why, but she felt like he was someone who needed to be seen, someone who was slipping away. For a moment, there was silence between them. Lena waited, knowing better than to rush. People like Kaylin didn't open up easily, but eventually he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I used to have everything," he said, his eyes far away. "A family, a home, a purpose. But I lost it all." His voice cracked on the last word, and he quickly looked down at his wine again, as if afraid she might see the pain in his eyes. Lena felt a pang in her chest, something she couldn't explain. She had seen pain before, in many forms, but this was different. It wasn't just sorrow. It was deep, raw, the kind of pain that seemed to have no end. She had seen people suffer, had served them their drinks while they drowned their misery in the warmth of alcohol, but Kaylin was different. His pain was like a storm, brewing just beneath the surface, threatening to break free. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice gentle. "Losing everything is never easy." Kaylin laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in it. "You don't know the half of it." Lena felt the distance between them widen. She had tried to offer comfort, but Kaylin had built walls around himself so high that no words could reach him. She could see it in his eyes, the way he kept the world at arm's length, afraid to let anyone in. But something inside her pushed her to try one more time. "You know," she said slowly, "sometimes, when we think we've lost everything, there's still something left. Maybe not what we expect, but something." Kaylin didn't look up. He took a long drink from his glass as if trying to swallow her words down with it. "I don't believe in anything anymore," he muttered almost to himself. Lena didn't respond immediately. She knew that he wasn't ready to hear her, but there was a quiet sadness in her heart, an understanding of his pain that she couldn't explain. She had never known loss in the same way, but she knew what it felt like to carry a burden, one that couldn't be shared, one that couldn't be healed by words. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost closing time. "Well," she said, standing up, "I'll leave you to your thoughts. If you need anything else, just let me know." Kaylin didn't respond. He didn't even look at her as she turned to walk away. But just before she reached the bar, she heard his voice again. "Wait." Lena paused and looked back, her hand resting on the counter. Kaylin was staring at her now, his eyes intense, as if struggling with something inside him. He hesitated, his lips parted as if searching for the right words. He stopped himself, shaking his head as though he didn't know how to finish. Then his voice softened. "It's just, you're the first person I've met in a long time who doesn't look at me like I'm broken." Lena didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him, feeling the weight of his words sink into her chest. There was a moment of silence between them, thick with unspoken understanding. "I'm not broken," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Just lost." Kaylin stared at her for a long moment as if he were trying to decide whether or not to say more. But then, with a soft sigh, he dropped his gaze and took another sip of his wine. "Thank you," he muttered, though it was unclear if he was thanking her for her kindness or for simply being there. Lena nodded, turning to leave again. But this time, something was different. Something had shifted ever so slightly between them. She couldn't explain it. She had seen people come and go, heard their stories, shared their moments of silence. But with Kaylin, it felt like something had begun to change. Not just in him, but in her too. As she reached the door, she stopped for just a moment and turned back to him, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "I would have stayed," she said. the words slipping out before she could stop them. Kalen looked up at her, his expression unreadable. But in his eyes, Lena saw something flicker, something she couldn't quite name. Then, with a quiet nod, he turned away, lost in his thoughts again, and Lena, for the first time in a long while, felt like she wasn't alone.